So I'm with a new friend of mine that I've been introduced to, William. Thank you very much, William. We're going to have a quick chat about, do dogs make us lonely, which seems contradictory to a lot of people. But what I'm going to say is, just like cocaine might make you happy in the short term, but in the long term it won't make you happy, in the same way dogs might make you connected in some limited way in the short term, but in the long term it's going to make you lonely. And this is based on Islamic ideas. You're not a Muslim, but you're a Christian, is that right? Is that my understanding?
Yes.
Yeah. And there's a lot of connection between Christians, Muslims and Jews here that is often not realised. But anyway, let's get into the ideas and then see what you think. We haven't had much of a discussion before, so it'll be very interesting to see what you think. But so what you need to know about dogs to begin with is that they are bred over centuries to be agreeable.
Yes.
And then the second very interesting thing is about dogs is that they are amongst all the animals, as far as I know, they know human facial expressions and emotions better than any other animal. So in short, they become basically the best sort of slave. They want to be your slave and they understand how to be your slave, right? So if you make friends with a dog and that's your number one friend, and this is going into the exaggeration, but you can maybe be a number two and number three, we'll talk about that as well. What happens is you're effectively be making friends with your reflection. You say something, do something, they will agree.
Well, people choose a dog that reflects themselves anyway, don't they? Their nature.
That is true, I've noticed that.
People are looking for their second self, in a sense. Maybe that's not in itself a bad thing, but if you relate to a human being, you can have a deeper relationship than you can with the dog. It's just that human relationships are on such a low level that people seek some solace with the animals. Now, they're very good for old people, because old people are alone, and they just need someone in the house. Maybe one of their partner has died, and they're in the house by themselves, and they can't easily go out. So it gives them a lot of happiness looking after the animals.
Yeah, I would say there are some extreme situations. I would say really that's an unfortunately common situation where there is an old person who's by themselves, because I think as a Muslim, and I think you would probably agree, there should be loads of family, loads of grandchildren around them to help them. Do you know what I mean? But unfortunately nowadays that's become a norm where children would run away from their parents because they don't value older people.
Yes, they learn to say sir to the teachers. They don't say sir to their parents. Isn't that interesting? If you go to school, you have to say yes sir, no sir. And when they come home, do they show the same respect to their parents? No. The parents have been sidelined, and the teachers now have become the parents, and they teach whatever is the state doctrine.
That's true.
Marxism, you see.
Right. That's
so. You're supposed to understand the nature of God through your parents. And God, you're not supposed to go direct to God. The purpose of having parents is to be the representative body of God. That's the whole idea of having parents. They are the representative body of God. Yeah. And you're preparing yourself for when you grow up. If you're a young person, you will one day have to be the representative body of God towards your children.
So I agree with so much of what you're saying. Yeah, your parents are the first people that you have a duty to listen to. But I'm going to focus on the dog thing for a bit. So so dogs are the best sort of, or they're basically trained through generations, through breeding, to be your slaves. And that would make you what I would describe as narcissistic, because the whole story of narcissism is this idea person who fell in love with their reflection, and that is what you will become, because you will lose the ability to indulge in conversations with people, have relationships with people who have any difference in their opinion with yours. So
that's so true. Because they're not going to argue with you, dogs, are they? But another human being will argue on some small point, and you have to solve it. You have to resolve it.
Yeah, and you might learn something from it.
That's the whole point. That in human relationship, as difficult as they are, you can grow and develop if you stick to the disciplines of required disciplines for a reasonable relationship, you eventually will learn deep things and have a deep relationship.
Yeah.
But with animals, I'm not against people having loving animals, but not as a substitute for people having friendships with people.
Right. And so I want to clarify something. So in Islam, I'll just read the saying of Prophet Muhammad. He said, "Angels do not enter a house which has either a dog or a picture, i.e. a picture as in a likeness of a person, like a drawing of a person," right? And so it's very odd that why are those two being coupled together? Because they're both signs of vanity of different sorts. Okay, so when you start drawing people, you might have seen in the if you go to National Portrait Gallery and things, instead of drawing people with clothes on, they start slowly over time start drawing people without clothes. They get obsessed with the appearance of people, but not the quality of people, right?
But
It's a sort. It becomes a vanity thing, and that's the same sort of thing with dogs. They become a vanity. A sign of vanity of different types. So one type is that they want something to agree with them, but also they do horrible things through breeding to the animals themselves. Like you have pugs who've been bred so far away from wolves that they no longer have a snout and they can't breathe properly. So it's cruel to the animals. What were you going to say?
Yes. I've forgotten what I was going to say. We're talking on two subjects here about human relationships and then also our attitude to animals.
Yes.
So in the Western countries, we certainly are concerned about animal welfare. When we hear something like in Korea, if they badly treat animals, apparently they beat an animal with sticks to make it taste better because they eat dogs in Korea, or they used to eat dogs.
Right.
So while it's alive, they beat it with sticks.
Right.
To make the meat more tender and tasty. We find that disgusting, that sort of thing.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, there are no rules in many countries or about how to treat animals. Islam is very clear about how to treat animals. It's got very specific rules, how to even kill animals. But actually, the thing I was going to say that you mentioned, and I forgot to clarify, is that we do believe in being kind to animals. There's an example of Prophet Muhammad said somebody went to heaven, a prostitute actually went to heaven, but her one good act of kindness was to give water from her slipper or her shoe by collecting water through her shoe to give water to a thirsty dog. So being kind to animals is fine, but the interesting and subtle difference is that we shouldn't have the dogs inside the house. They can be outside the house. I've had many pet dogs outside the house in the Middle East.
What about cats now? You're talking about dogs at the moment. What about cats?
That's right. So cats are allowed inside the house. And famously in Arab countries, cats are given great respect. So I've seen places where there'll be cats in the doorway of a shop and nobody would disturb the cat and people would quite carefully walk over the cat. You won't even have that kind of respect in this country, in so-called animal lover country, right? Okay, and I would argue, and I will argue in a bit later on maybe, how we don't actually love animals, because the way I had pets, I kept pets in Jordan in the Middle East, is that we would find it really cruel to even have a collar on any animal, just like you won't have a collar on a human being. Right, and they're not trapped inside the house because animals don't like being in houses. So my pet dogs that we had, they were free to roam around, and they would go and meet their friends at night time. You would hear them, howling and talking to each other, and then they would come back during the day. And there was an understood relationship. We would give them food, and they knew they were basically guard dogs, right? So that's how animals should be treated and want to be treated. And then you were also talking about your house smells funny. If you
have people who have older people who have dogs can have a very smelly house because it's hard for them to clean up. Right. And if they've got carpets and things like that, and that will keep people away. People will go to their house and they might think, oh, that's not very pleasant. So that will make them more isolated. Yes. It's a vicious spiral, but this comes with a family breakdown. Yeah. If you have extended family, if you go to the Middle East, I'm sure that most people don't get lonely. There's always some family around them.
That's right.
In countries like India and so on, there'll always be someone to look after everybody.
Yeah,
so anybody's completely neglected.
That's right. They,
But our culture isn't like that. You can get dropped out of the system. We have small families as well in the West, maybe not even replacement level, sometimes just one child.
yeah, so families are totally breaking down in the West. They barely have children. There's so many people around here who don't even get married because they're scared of getting married because they don't trust anybody anymore.
People are not thinking through the problem of marriage. Maybe young women want a career. They feel, I want to get out in the world. I won't be respected if I raise children. So I want to get a career. I want to be somebody. But if you change the concept and have 3 generations living together, then the mother, she doesn't necessarily have to be with a child. The grandmother can be with the child. Her mother, that is. The child's grandmother can look after the child, and the woman can get out in the world, have a career, look after other people. And can you imagine when she comes back to spend more time with her children when they're adolescent? That'll be a skilled woman that will know how to talk to children. So we need to shift.
I'm not sure if I agree with that, because I would say in most situations try to avoid women going to work, but I think that's a different video. I'm going to try to finish off this one. So what were the ideas I wanted to get across very quickly? So Prophet Muhammad, first of all, suggests not having a dog inside your house is different to having a dog outside your house. And because when you have a dog inside the house, the relationship is completely different. It's kind of like a member of the family versus an animal. And an animal should be treated with kindness, but not as a replacement of a human being, which is what's happening. So there's a lot of people who say we love animals, or we don't like human beings, but we like animals. And that's because they lost the ability to be patient with other people. And this is statistically true. England is one of the worst countries for this, that we only talk to people who agree with us. Which is also why people are becoming lonely, because they can't. As you reduce or lower the bar, as it were, of who you listen to, because everybody's called toxic because they agree with you. There'll be a point in which they have to totally agree with you to be friends with you, right? So then you resort to having a dog as your friend. And when you have even if you have 1 or 2 friends, but you have a dog as one of your main friends, that will become a crutch that you become dependent on. And you realize, and then you slowly lose all your friends because they don't match up to the slave-like friendship of your dog. What do you think?
Well, there's some logic in that, isn't it? It's easier. Animals naturally would cooperate with human beings in some way. They've been domesticated to a very great degree. And as you said, they've been bred over generations to have certain characteristics. Could be guard dogs, could be some dogs, they don't bark a lot. They're very quiet. They're trained not to bark. You see, like Katana. Is it Katana, the Japanese dog?
Oh, and that's maybe because they've been bred so much that they're so far, like we were talking about pugs and different animals, sausage dogs, they actually suffer from a lot of health issues. They can't breathe properly, there's not enough space for their brains, but they've been bred so far from human beings. They turn into these little things, they don't look anything like wolves, you know? So
some animals look very strange.
Yeah.
Little animals.
And so I think all the dogs that we had in the Middle East, they were just walking down the street, we'd give them some food and they understood. They're very smart, they understood the relationship, right? They loved doing their duty as a guard dog. It's like they had a pride in it, right? And they didn't have to stick around, they could go anytime they wanted, right? So I think most dogs would like to be guard dogs. They like to be of service, they have some pride in that, and then they like being fed as well, right? So, but Westerners don't understand animals. They're really divorced from nature, so they don't appreciate that.
Oh, an interesting statement.
Yeah, and we think we're animal lovers, but actually we're animal abusers because we force animals to be in the house for hours and hours when we go off to work and things like that.
Of course,
you know, and stuck inside our house. That's horrible.
Point. If you let an animal go onto the street, it could get run over by a car, couldn't it?
Yeah.
So you can end up just trapping it in a room to be there for your own happiness.
Yes, and vanity, own interest.
Whatever. Yes, that's a real problem. But if you let the animal be wild, have their wild time. I think cats have their wild time. They just like to run around. They seem to be very happy when they're running around. But they can run under a car, and there's the dilemma. There's the dilemma of having an animal. You start to love the animal, and then when the animal is injured or killed, then you've got a big space in your life once you've lost the animal. So you start to trap it in the house. It becomes like trapped.
Yeah, and you become trapped, like you're saying.
Yes,
you become dependent.
yes.
You become dependent, and you think you can. This is a kind of a wider problem with materialism, that we make not just animals as substitutes for friendships, but we make Netflix as a substitute. We watch video by ourselves. We don't need this human being. We can just watch video. We can entertain ourselves, and then slowly, you lose all friends. You lose any sort of meaningful relationship because everybody has to agree with you, and then you become more and more lonely. It's a downhill spiral.
Yes, anyway, the common point for all people with religion, the common point, of course, is God. God is, and for Christians, God is the Father. So that should be a starting point of being happy to meet other people because they are made by the same Creator. So that's a good starting point. But if you don't have that idea as a starting point and you think you evolved from a monkey, then you don't evolve or aren't created by a creator, you're created by a monkey. You've evolved randomly to survive from a monkey.
Yeah.
That must affect your whole psychology of how you exist,
Yes.
how you see your own value. So
Very interesting. So I think you're leading to how I want to finish this off in a way. So I mean, very quickly, for people who don't realise this dog issue is a problem, statistically, the number of before I get to the God point, because I think that's the crux of the matter, because I don't want to talk about just problems, I want to talk about solutions. Okay, so firstly, so people are aware, in the last 10 years, in the UK, the number of people who own dogs or pet dogs has risen from 22% to 33%. That's a massive increase in 10 years, right? So, and most of those people use, I think it was 95%, I forgot the statistic, use dogs to cure their loneliness, but only cures it short term, actually makes things worse, as we were saying, long term. And then to the main point, really, there's the bigger issue is, how do you actually find happiness? How do you resolve the loneliness that people are trying to fill with animals? And yes, it starts with religion. And religion, so your only true happiness is your oneness with God.
we should think it starts with the origin of the universe, the Creator, the origin of the universe. We must recognize that we have an origin. Yeah. And if we don't have a relationship with the origin, everything then becomes relative and random.
Yes, so everything feels pointless, which is why there's so many people. The number one way in which young people in the UK and the West die is through suicide. So men especially. Women, they get more depressed, but they're not good at killing themselves. And it sounds sort of funny, but I know a businesswoman who failed twice at committing suicide, right? It's a good friend of mine. Sadly, she keeps... she never learns her lessons, I should say, in terms of like over-focusing on materialism. So, yes, it's very important to realise we're not created through random mutations. I do believe in evolution, but I believe that's just a mechanism. It's not random.
Adaptation. There's an adaptive principle.
Yeah, and
obviously, if you have a group of children in the right environment, the tall ones might survive better than the short ones. Or the ones with smaller noses might survive better in the North Pole than the ones with long noses, because they might get frostbite.
So God has built that into the design, so we adapt.
That some things will adapt, and of course in the modern world you can move. So if you happen to have a long nose, don't go to the Arctic, go to a warmer climate.
Or people like me
we can change our environment. If it's not suitable for us, we can change our environment.
That's right.
Are not dominated anymore by the environment. We can shape our environment.
That's why I'm moving to the Middle East, because I don't get enough sun here. I need more. You can stay here. You're white enough. I've got like a built-in sunblock. It's a bit of a problem. We don't get enough sun.
That's right. You don't have to worry about getting sunburn. I've got to watch about getting sunburn. I can be in serious trouble if I get sunburn.
Yeah.
I have to watch out today, and look at my hands and everything.
So what I want to say to finish off is, yes, first of all, I 100% agree that you need a meaningful life, and this is what psychologists say. Psychologists like Viktor Frankl, who said you need a meaningful life to be happy, and God is, according to his terms, a super meaning, because you lose all meaning with that. If everything's random, everything feels pointless. It's something called nihilism. Everything feels so pointless that people get depressed. So there's nothing good that you can do that will make your life worth it. So that's a problem. And then on top of that, there's the wisdom within religion that enables us to build bonds. For example, rules of relationships, like who should go to work, who shouldn't, or who should avoid it. Like in Islam, the person who's responsible for making money is a man. And if both try to go to work, that means maybe the children don't get taken care of. There's 101 problems that people are suffering from at the moment. So Islam seems to be the only system that seems to be working, because we're the only ones who have loads of children. We double our percentage. We're only 5% of the UK and we have 10% of the children. So we're growing in numbers and everybody else is halving in numbers.
That's right. The Western people, they don't see children as being part of freedom, what we call freedom. It doesn't fit in. No one thinks, oh, the more children I have, the more freedom I have, the more the range of love I can experience. So love is freedom. People don't seek freedom as an end. People are seeking true love. And so they get away from a bad circumstance to find true love. But one of the best ways, of course, is to experience love is to take care. Well, it could be an animal, but more likely a human being, to raise and nurture a young person or person going through difficult times. You can nurture and raise somebody even who's not your own children. You can be a parent. You can have a parental heart. It's not just for someone who has their own children. And so you're living and raising something is the essence of understanding the nature of God, because God created us and looks after us and has created a redemptive process for us despite everything going wrong because of our failure to fulfill.
Yeah, I want to jump in. I think you made a really good point about love. People mix up love and lust. That's why people throw people away all the time.
That's right.
And then they also don't value children anymore because they don't understand that love is kindness. So you stick with a husband or wife because of kindness, not because they have a magical feeling. And actually, real love develops over time because you have that trust that you can be wrong, you can have a different opinion, and you'll still stay with them. That's real. That gives confidence.
So the big dilemma, when people don't experience love, they will inevitably separate. That will inevitably happen. But some people, they have a go at it because they assume it might not be any easier the next time round. Some people are very realistic.
Yeah.
Some people try many partners and they realize it'll never amount to anything. They have to change their thinking first to get more out of a relationship.
Right.
But God raises us. God raised man. God raised the angels.
Yeah.
So,
I
that's the only way we could understand God. We can't understand God unless we have children.
Yeah.
Because children are powerless in a way. They need the protection and the guidance, education from parents. That's how we understand the nature of God. When you love a child, you can realize how much God loves you.
Yeah, so that's
If you
Muslims.
don't have a child, how can you understand that?
So Muslims think in the same way. Interestingly,
You should think in that way.
So we look at God, and He's really gracious and kind. He gives so much without expecting anything back. That's actually love, right? But our idea of love, especially romantic love that you were talking about, is that you expect something back. You say, I'll only love you if you love me, and if I don't get it back, I'm gonna, you know what I mean? So this is in the West, they've lost the idea of true love, and
Maybe it never existed, you see.
I think it did. I think it's just in the modern era.
In the modern era, there's a lot of pressure on people to move on and not to make effort in a relationship.
Right. In the modern era, there's so much of a mess. This idea of freedom instead of responsibility and things like that.
Freedom will bring happiness, but freedom only is people want sensation. They're looking for sensations.
The freedom can make you just an animal, basically, but responsibility actually gives you meaning to your life. And so, I think you made some awesome points. I wasn't even thinking about talking about. You were talking about what is love, because that's what reason why we so-called love animals. And actually, we're possessive. We use them as materialistic objects that can be rejected or thrown away. So we got the idea of love. In before that, you have to have the idea of purpose in your life. And then I was going to talk about this last thing, which is what religion brings, which is community and also, we already talked about rules of engagement or relationships. If you don't have those, relationships don't work. And you can see Islam is working, and values, exactly. So, for example, Islam says go to the mosque 5 times a day. What's the benefit? Besides thinking spiritually and reflecting on why your life is there, you also have to be shoulder to shoulder. Literally, in Islam, you have to be shoulder to shoulder.
It's not individualistic. So
it's not individualistic.
So if you're in the same boat,
and I say the same thing about Christianity.
Together, you can understand each other.
Yeah.
Like usually when men go to war, war.
Yeah.
They're shoulder to shoulder,
Yeah.
and they never lose those relationships when they come back and the war is over.
Yeah.
They maintain for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
I met lots of chaps when I was young who were the older chaps who fought in the Second World War and the Korean War.
Yeah.
And they all maintained their relationships from the wartime years.
In fact, some of them say it's the best time of their lives,
Yes,
even though
that's right.
because they had that sense of community and we're in it together.
They were united. They were not
Yeah.
centering on themselves.
Yeah.
They were centering on something much bigger, a bigger idea.
Yeah, so it tells you that happiness is the idea of happiness is very strange. The true idea of happiness is very alien to Westerners because they think it's all about getting things, and the reality is, even psychologists will tell you, it's about giving. Really, that's actually what builds relationships. But I don't want to go into that yet. And so, yeah, what was I going to say? There was. I even recommend, since you're a Christian, and I go around telling Christians to be better Christians. For example, as psychologists say that as Christians have stopped going to church on a regular basis, happiness is going down, which shouldn't be surprising because people no longer sit together, talk together, think about where their lives are going. That's what a sermon is.
Maybe the problem's coming because even religions who teach about one God, they're not in such a good relationship with each other.
Yeah.
And then it puts off the younger generation. Well, why aren't they talking to each other? The religion itself can create very high walls of tradition, which also can separate people.
Do you mean between Islam and Christianity and Judaism or something like that?
Yes, all the major religions. If
Yeah.
you say even the monotheistic religions
Yeah.
who teach one God.
I mean, we can see in our discussions here, we're not hating each other, we're not arguing against each other, and you'll see there's loads of Jews here, we're good friends with Jews, I think generally, and the Muslims or whatever. There are people who are rude to each other as well, but there's a lot of understanding between each other for the people who actually spend some
I think
time to discuss.
It would be good to have good relationships between people regardless of religion.
And
Religion itself has to develop because many young people think religion is not developing in important ways.
I would say it's sort of the opposite. When we lose, I think one of the reasons, and you might agree, the so-called development of Christianity, where they've lost they no longer hold fast to their true values. Okay, they no longer stand for anything, and then they're no longer for useful. Like if you can say a woman can do anything, and she has to listen to her husband, like Paul and Orthodox Christianity or Judaism, I should say, used to teach, then you don't have any difference between men and women, and you got all the confusion that we have. You don't have roles to play in relationships that work effectively. Women are good at certain things, men are good at certain things, you know what I mean? So I think we shouldn't develop, we should hold fast, if there's a mistake in the teaching, we should learn from, that's true, but we should hold fast to those true values, and then
Yes,
things will...
As they say, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes.
And there's this danger of thinking that religion's old-fashioned, and yet what might replace it is something a million times worse for all its problems.
Which is, we're experiencing a million times worse right now. Yeah.
Yes, we might fade with liberalism. We don't know what chaotic situation will come with liberalism. It's the most destructive force you can have in the world.
But I mean, you just told me, you said we don't know, but I think we can see it's the most destructive force. We can see the whole population dying out in the West, which is pretty bad.
So if the West can't even replace itself because it doesn't even have the idea of having children, something's gone badly wrong.
Yes.
Why wouldn't a woman want to have children?
Yeah.
At one time, it was maternal instinct. It would be natural to want to have children.
Because they've been fed so much propaganda that your career is a bit more important than taking care of children.
What's important as well, if people have many partners, then the relationship doesn't work. So trying to be prepared, make a choice, that's critical. Not to have lots of partners. It's destructive to have lots of partners. So usually marriages were arranged by parents.
This is, whatever you're saying is absolutely really amazing, but I'm going to cut off the video so it feels like at least we were talking about dogs.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think we've covered, I mean, do you feel like you said whatever? I don't feel like you completely cut you off, but is there anything more about dogs that you want to mention?
Not really, no, not at the moment, no.
Thank you so much, William. I look forward to making loads more videos with you.